And the first one is to take a step back and try to understand the gatekeeper, as you've seen with just about all the chapters of the smart sales system. When we're talking about a different area, the first step is to take a step back and try to understand the other person that you're either trying to deal with, trying to sell to, trying to deal with an objection from. The first thing to understand about gatekeepers is that in the same way that if you're a salesperson, you've been given a quota, you maybe been assigned the task of getting into and selling to particular accounts or into a territory. And so it's your goal to get into an account. And in the same way that you have that goal, many situations, a gatekeeper has the exact same goal. Actually, let me back up, has the exact opposite goal, which is to keep you out. And said another way is their goal is to keep salespeople out. The people that are behind them, that they are playing the role of gatekeeper for, might most likely do not want to be bothered or deal with cold calls from salespeople that are trying to sell something. So they will instruct that gatekeeper to screen calls. And if it's a salesperson trying to sell something, they will be instructed to get rid of that salesperson. And in the same way that you might go through training, such as training like this, to get into new accounts, to cold call, to deal with objections, gatekeepers are often trained on how to identify which calls are coming from salespeople and how to get rid of them. It's not as complex of training as you might go through in terms of sales training, but they're definitely given instructions on this is what salespeople look like. These are ways to get them to self-identify themselves. For example, gatekeepers will be taught, hey, when you think it's a salesperson, ask them what the call is in regards to. Most likely what they say will allow you to identify that it's a salesperson. When you do identify it as a salesperson, do not let them in. Get rid of them. Not only are they instructed to get rid of salespeople, but you could kind of look at it as though they're going to look bad when a salesperson slips past them. So if somehow they aren't able to identify that someone is a product-pushing, annoying, pesky salesperson, and that person slips past them and gets to someone in the organization, say a decision maker, and ends up on the phone with that person, the gatekeeper can look bad. Either look bad in terms of reputation or job performance or be reprimanded. It's their job to keep you out. And so when you add up all those factors, the gatekeeper naturally takes the adversarial role to a salesperson. You're trying to get in, they're trying to keep you out. So this immediately creates a level of conflict. In most scenarios, if you're successful, then they are being unsuccessful. And when they're successful, you're not being successful. So this is really important for you to understand. The other thing is that most likely a lot of the gatekeepers that you're dealing with, their job is not really rewarding and a lot of fun, and it could be really hectic. You know, a gatekeeper might be a receptionist, and they're dealing with a lot of different incoming that they have to juggle and deal with. The phone's ringing, deliveries are being delivered, guests are needing to be checked in, questions are being asked. It's just nonstop. And while you may enjoy selling, most salespeople enjoy selling, and you might enjoy closing deals and making money, often gatekeepers don't have that level of satisfaction in their job. This may come through when you have to deal with them. So not only are they doing everything they can to keep you out, they just might not be a bundle of fun to deal with day in and day out. So these are just some things that you might agree with some of them, you may disagree with some of them, but the goal here is try to understand the person that you're dealing with. And so one thing you can take from that is that if they are assigned with keeping pesky product-pushing salespeople out, the worst thing you could do is sound like a salesperson that's trying to sell something when you're talking to a gatekeeper. The more you can minimize that, the less resistance that you will face when dealing with gatekeepers. Another tactic is to try to enlist their help. Now, this refers to if the gatekeeper is your adversary and basically on the other side of the negotiation table, meaning it's a zero-sum game and only one person's going to win, and you're going against them head to head. One thing you could do is to try to get on the same side of the table as they are by trying to enlist their help. By the way, this doesn't work necessarily when you're already in confrontation mode where someone's trying to get rid of you, a gatekeeper is trying to get rid of you already. This is a tactic you use more proactively. So you'll try this before dealing with resistance. You're trying to enlist their help in terms of trying to help you with where you are and where you're trying to go. So an example of this might be a gatekeeper answers and you might say something like, I'm not sure who I'm supposed to talk to. Maybe you can help point me in the right direction. I usually deal with someone in finance. A lot of times I either talk to a director of finance or a controller. Can you help point me in the right direction? And so what I'm doing there is I'm trying to enlist their help to point me in the right direction. It's just a slight modification from asking a gatekeeper, hi, can you connect me with a controller? It's just a slight modification there, and you're basically asking for their help and enlisting their help so that maybe they can help get you where they're going in the right direction. And it's just that subtle change that might make them decrease their guardedness and help you versus triggering their guard and blocking you out right away. One of the most helpful gatekeeper tactics that we'll talk about here today is to treat the gatekeeper like the prospect. And you're not going to want to do this out of the gate. This is like your fallback position. So when you're calling it into an account, you're on the phone with the gatekeeper, they're starting to block you out. Either they're blocking you out because they sense you're a salesperson and they're not going to let you in or let anybody in, or they might be being difficult because they just don't know who you are and who to send you to, and they're just confused and you're confusing them with what you're asking for. Maybe you don't have an exact contact name. So basically the picture I'm trying to paint is you try to get in or try to get transferred and you're facing some resistance. Well, what you can do is you can start to shift gears, because let's face it, if you were passed along and transferred through to the prospect, you might use some of your call script or some of your sales message, and you might do something like share your value proposition, ask some questions, talk about your product or whatever. You're going to go through some sort of routine when you talk to the prospect. Well, if you can't get through, you're being blocked out, you're facing some resistance, take a step back and start to treat the gatekeeper like the prospect that you're trying to reach. And let me show you, don't worry, I'm going to show you exactly what this looks like. So a first example here is you could share your value points. This really works well if the gatekeeper doesn't know who you should talk to or why you should talk to anyone. So you're starting to face some resistance, and it might look something like this. Actually, let me take a step back real quick and let you know who I am and why I'm calling. The reason for my call is that I work with CFOs and I help them to streamline their global reporting for their financial accounts. I don't know if you all want to improve that area, but that's why I'm reaching out. Do you know who the best person for me to talk to is? So what I did there is it's the value points building block, but I'm facing resistance and we're starting to butt heads, and here I am, I'm like pushing pause, taking a step back, and I'm educating the gatekeeper in the same way that I'd educate the prospect by sharing my value proposition. It not only tells the gatekeeper why you should be passed through because you're sharing your value and how you can help, it educates them on maybe who you should talk to. So another version of that is you could try to educate the prospect with your pain points. So again, you're facing resistance, and actually let me take a step back real quick and let you know why I'm calling. The reason for my call is that I work with a lot of CFOs, and they often have challenges with finding a lot of errors in their reports, and it takes a lot of time to reconcile their different global accounts. Now, I don't know if you guys are concerned about those areas, but that's why I'm reaching out. Do you know who the best person to talk to is, or do you know if you guys are, if your CFO is concerned or not about those areas? Let me just point out, what you're trying to do here is you're not necessarily trying to get the gatekeeper to say, oh, we need that. Oh, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I'm so glad you called. We're waiting for someone for that. You're trying to educate them and trying to get them to drop their guard just a little bit. You're trying to sound more sophisticated, like and that you're not a pesky salesperson, and show that you have something valuable to offer versus just some product to push. Another version of this educate attempt is to use your name drop building block. So this might look like, actually, let me take a step back, let you know who I am and why I'm calling. The reason for the call is that we worked with XYZ Corp and we helped them to streamline their global financial reporting. And this ultimately helped them to reduce the amount of time that it takes to run their reports and also improve the accountability for their individual business units. Now, I don't know if we can help you guys in the same way, and that's why I'm reaching out. Do you know who the best person for me to talk to is? And so again, hopefully there you might get pointed in the right direction. You might get some kind of dialogue going with the gatekeeper. We have a couple options here. We're continuing with treating the gatekeeper like the prospect, but another option is to start asking questions. So this works well when you have a difficult gatekeeper, and you might just kind of give up with trying to get to the prospect and just say, oh, okay, well, I tell you what, maybe you might know the answer to this. Do you guys currently have your reporting integrated with your ERP system? So right there, I'm just asking one of my pre-qualifying pain questions. Again, your goal here is not necessarily to get the gatekeeper to say, oh, we need that. But what you'll find here is you're probably going to get one or two different types of responses. Either the gatekeeper might answer your question, and that's good because if it's a really good question that you'd like to ask the prospect, well, heck, if you can get some information out of the gatekeeper, then that is not a call wasted. Maybe the gatekeeper might answer your question, which helps you to determine that the prospect needs what you sell, or maybe the gatekeeper answers your question and it could sound like a credible answer, and it helps you to identify that you don't really need to waste your time calling this prospect because they don't fit. If the gatekeeper tells you an answer where it helps you to identify that there's a fit, you can then follow that up with, oh, well, see, that's why I'm reaching out, because that's the type of thing that we help with, and we could probably have a really productive conversation with your CFO. Can you help point me in the right direction of who that is, or are you able to transfer me? I think that they would really find our conversation to be productive. So you basically use the information gathered to justify them passing you through if they are indeed being difficult. Now, certainly they may still just block you out, and you might, again, like I said, there's some gatekeepers where regardless of what you do, they're not going to let you in, and that's fine. But at least when you face some resistance, if you have this tool in your toolkit, then you have something that you try before getting completely shut down. Now, there is a chance that you ask your pain question here and the gatekeeper they don't know. And that could very likely be the case if you have a really great pain question to ask and it's the prospect that would know the answer to that. And so the gatekeeper might answer with something like, I'm not sure. I'm not the person that would know the answer to that. And then you could reply with something like, oh, well, you see, that's why I'm trying to get in touch with your CFO. They're the ones that really know the answer to that, and that's why I'm trying to reach out. Who is the best person for me to talk to about that? So again, you're treating the gatekeeper like a prospect, asking you a paying question. Depending on their answer, you have some sort of follow-up there to try to stay in the game and get around the gatekeeper. And another very related scenario to that is instead of asking your pain questions, you could ask some of your current environment questions. So the gatekeeper says, we already use someone for that, or we don't need that, or we're not interested. Oh, okay, yeah, hey, well, I tell you what, maybe you might be able to answer this for me. Who are you guys currently using today for your reporting business intelligence platform? So what I did there is I'm being shut down by the gatekeeper, being blocked out, and I basically treat them like the prospect and respond with asking a current environment question. Same scenario there in terms of the answers. Depending on the answer, you have a few different options for how to respond and try to work your way around. So that is treating the gatekeeper like the prospect, and some of those are actually just very similar to the objection handling responses that we discussed in the last chapter. So not a lot of new content that I'm giving you there that you have to remember. Those are objection handling responses what you would change is kind of the intro sentence. So you might add something like, okay, well, let me take a step back and let you know why I'm calling. And then everything after that is the objection response that we've already provided you. So the only thing additional you're learning there is, oh, well, let me take a step back and tell you why I'm calling. And then there's maybe the follow-up question there at the end is something new to add to your objection response. The next gatekeeper tactic is to display some sort of social proof. So social proof is basically displaying that you're connected to people in the organization. Social proof means you know people, right? So social proof in a social setting, like at a party, would be you know the hosts. Or at a bar, a club means you know you're a VIP and you know the doorman and the bartenders and the people with bottle service. You know people. And if you have social proof, you have a lot of credibility and people are a lot more open to working with you. And that applies in the B2B setting. And you can apply this concept to gatekeepers, because if gatekeepers think you are an outsider who's not connected to the organization and you're trying to get in order to sell your product and push your product and bug people, then they're going to try to keep you out. But if you are able to demonstrate that you're connected, you're already on the inside. And yes, you might be a business person, consultant, advisor, salesperson that represents a company or product or service. But if you're already connected and involved in the account, then maybe not only is it okay to let you in, but it might be inappropriate to completely shut you down. Meaning if you're already involved with one department and you're calling in to talk to another department, and if the gatekeeper is a total jerk to you and just kicks you out and blocks you out, they might look bad because you're already doing business with the organization. So it buys you a ticket into the organization or gets you around a difficult gatekeeper. So what that might look like is you're talking to a gatekeeper. A proactive way to use this would be to name drop someone else in the organization that you know or that you're working with. So you might say something like, yeah, I've been speaking with Martha Martinez in accounting, and now we're trying to meet with someone on the HR side. I'm not sure who to speak with. Do you know who the VP or director of HR is? Can you point me in the right direction? So what I did there is I just name dropped Martha in accounting to establish social proof and to use that to buy my ticket into HR and basically decrease the guardedness of the gatekeeper. Now that's proactive, like out of the gate, I'm throwing the name drop out there. You could just say, yes, I'm trying to reach the director of HR. And if they say, may I ask what this is in regards to, so they're starting to screen you, then you could say something like, oh yeah, well sure. The reason for my call is I worked with Martha Martinez in accounting, and we're trying to follow up that meeting with a discussion with HR, and I just don't know the name of the person over there, so I'm hoping you can point me in the right direction. So that was the reactive sort of name drop. This is pretty powerful. You may say, I love it, but the common response to that is, well, what if you haven't spoken to anyone yet, and you're just trying to get into a new account cold? And it's a valid concern. But I have a little workaround for you, and I will tell you, we do not teach you to manipulate, to mislead in any way. We teach you real sales tactics that you can use without really like trying to lie or cheat. But I'm going to share with you kind of play on words here, which is, let's say that we did not meet with Martha Martinez, but we know that Martha Martinez is the accounts payable manager. We know her name, but we don't know who the name of the HR director is. We could say something like this. Well, the reason why I'm reaching out is we are planning to meet with Martha Martinez in accounts payable, but before we do that, we need to meet with the HR director. Can you point me in the right direction of who that is? So what I said there is we are planning to meet with Martha Martinez in accounts payable. It's kind of a play on words, because you could plan to meet with someone without having a meeting on the calendar. It's your 100% intentions to meet with Martha Martinez. You don't have a meeting on the calendar, but it is your plan to meet with her. So it's not being dishonest, but it could easily be heard as that you have a meeting on the calendar with Martha Martinez, establishing social proof and buying you credibility. Something to test and try. The next tactic is to mention an initiative. So this is another way to kind of establish credibility and appear like you're already aware and engaged with the organization. So let's say that you did some research on a company and you learned that they had an initiative to consolidate their 3 supply chain management software systems into one. You read that in a press release. And now you're calling into IT and you're getting some resistance from a gatekeeper. They say, what's this in regards to? Oh, well, the reason for my call is I was calling to talk to the director of IT and get some details regarding the initiative of supply chain software consolidation. So you mention an initiative. It's kind of similar to mentioning a name drop. You're basically establishing credibility. So give it a shot. Some scenarios it could work. You could either use it proactively or reactively. Proactively would be just throwing it out there before you face resistance. Now, you may say, well, okay, that sounds logical or decent, but what if I don't know of any initiatives? You could also just throw out a very common initiative. If you don't have like a very specific initiative to mention, you could say something like, there's initiatives that are pretty either consistent from organization to organization or initiatives that sound realistic to a gatekeeper, such as cost reduction, labor optimization, cost of goods sold minimization. Just kind of grab some accounting terms and throw minimization, optimization around it, and just say and mention that as an initiative that you're calling to meet with them about, talk to them about. That's the purpose of your call. Another tactic is to try to befriend the gatekeeper. This isn't a stretch or completely revolutionary idea, but the more you can kind of become a friend of the gatekeeper, the less resistance, reluctance, and rejection that you can face. So how can you do that? Well, I'll tell you one thing is that if you just try to smile while you're talking to the gatekeeper, that will modify your tonality and how you sound, and that could very directly impact how you're received. So if you're prospecting, you may feel stressed out. You may have just dealt with a difficult gatekeeper before talking to the gatekeeper you're dealing with, and you're tense. And odds are you're probably not smiling. Well, if you force a smile, even just a fake smile, have a mirror in front of you on your desk and smile while you're talking to the gatekeeper, even maybe laugh laugh at yourself in certain situations and add humor. You can create a more friendly atmosphere with the gatekeeper, and little touches like catching their name and using their name after you're able to find out what their name is and build that relationship can improve your ability to get around gatekeepers. Dealing with a gatekeeper is an adversarial type of relationship, right? You're on opposite sides of the negotiating table with usually a zero-sum game being played. And like I said, there are some that there's nothing you can do to get around them. One last fallback position could be to share that you understand them. So the first thing I talked about was understanding the gatekeeper. Now I want to talk about sharing with them that you understand them. Let's say you're in a stalemate situation. They're not letting you pass and you're not giving up or you're not ready to walk away yet. You could share that you understand what's going on with them in a last-ditch effort to try to get around them with something like this. I understand the situation you're in. You get calls all day from salespeople, and it's your job to not let bothersome salespeople through. I just want to let you know that I am not one of those annoying, pesky salespeople. I will be really very respectful of the CFO's time, and there's a very good chance that we can have a very productive conversation because we reduce a tremendous amount of time for CFOs. We can reduce the errors in their reports, And that is usually something that they're very interested in, and it's very helpful to a CFO. And I think that the CFO at your company would probably find it to be very helpful. So is there any way you can either let me know who that person is, or point me in the right direction, or share with me the best way to connect with that individual? So just an example there of taking a step back and sharing with them that you understand. Because what basically the sharing of the understanding there is that you're telling them you know what they're doing, that they're blocking you out, and that it's their job to keep you out. So that, and when they start to feel understood instead of feeling attacked, they might begin to decrease their guard a little bit. And the last gatekeeper tactic is just to try to avoid the gatekeeper altogether. So one of the best ways to do this is just to make your calls at a time when the gatekeeper will not be at their desk. So this can often be calling before 8 a.m., between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., which is the lunch hour, or calling after 5 p.m. Now, of course, if you are a salesperson, you can't just stop and make all your calls at those odd off-peak hours. But if you have called someone a few times and you're dealing with a difficult gatekeeper and you can't seem to get around them, make a task on your calendar to try back at an off hour. And if that's a front desk receptionist or an executive assistant, there's a good chance that maybe someone else will answer the phone, or if you have a direct dial and your direct dial is being for your target contact is being routed to a gatekeeper, in the off hours is when they might answer the phone for themselves. Either they're in the office early and the phone rings and they answer it, they don't know who it is. They're at their desk working during lunch and they answer the phone. It's another thing for you to try.